Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Welcome back. I'm Domenic Rinaldi, host of the M&A Unplugged podcast. Understanding your business's ideal client, how to put a value on your time as a business owner, and the importance of operating a self-managing business are just a couple of the topics I cover in today's episode with our guest, Michael Zipursky. Michael has had a very successful career consulting with clients in a broad range of industries about how to operate a more valuable and gratifying business. Having built and sold several of his own businesses, Michael understands the challenges entrepreneurs face, such as identifying the ideal clients, how to acquire those ideal clients, building marketing messages and systems, trying to balance both your professional and personal demands, and being stuck and breaking through barriers for growth. Michael is a wealth of knowledge, and he offers some very practical advice in this episode. I know you will walk away with some ideas you can start implementing in your own business immediately. But before we get into today's episode, if you want to avoid common deal pitfalls and the risk of losing substantial dollars, you need to know how ready you really are to buy a business. Because I believe proper preparation is so critical to your ideal success, we have published several free resources to help you be better prepared. You can access these resources on our website at k2advisor.com/resources. Being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here, and I know you're going to get a ton out of today's episode. Hey, Michael, welcome to M&A Unplugged. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hey, Domenic, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, so, I'm really interested to get your perspectives today, knowing that, you're a consultant and you've been for a long time, but you're also a consultant to consultants. So you teach consultants how to help business owners, prepare their businesses, increase value in their businesses. So there's a lot to cover here. But let's start off with, how did you get into this business? What got you into consulting? And then we'll dive into some of the meatier topics I want to cover.
All right. So a fair bit to cover. We're going back now about 21 years when I started my first consulting business with my cousin and business partner to this day, Sam. That was a web development and design company, kind of our first foray into running our own business. And this was just out of kind of high school for me. Gave me some experience in working with clients, doing the marketing, kind of thinking strategically. Sam was more on the creative, the design, the development side of that business. And it was a really great experience. A few years after that, we then moved into starting a second business, which was called Kankei Culture. And Kankei is the Japanese word for relationship. We've always been very focused on relationships and the importance of focusing on that when you're building a business. And that business took us overseas. I actually went over to Japan, opened up a branch office for that company. We were doing branding and kind of visual design and strategy for organizations. Had the opportunity while in Japan to work with some very large organizations like Panasonic and Sumitomo and the Dow Jones and Financial Times Japan and a whole bunch of others, advising them on how to enter English-based, so kind of typically North American, European markets with their products and services. And then I spent about 5 or 6 years in Japan building that business, then came back to North America and started another consulting business, this time called Religy Marketing. That stands for Relationship Strategy. So again, you can tell the big focus on relationships there. And that was really around lead kind of generation for professional services firms. So a lot of clients in accounting, investment, other consulting firms, really helping them to generate leads and helping them with their marketing. And at that time, Dominic, both Sam and I, so we had built kind of multiple companies together. At that time, when I ran Religy Marketing, we were actually doing separate things. Sam was actually in Japan at that time, working for an English language magazine, doing kind of as a marketing director role. He came back to Vancouver. We met at a family barbecue one summer, and we were just kind of catching up on what we were doing. We've always been very, very close, like brothers. And we said, you know what, like we should do something again together, but this time we should do it online. Because to that point, we had been running kind of brick and mortar, the classic consulting, professional services types of businesses. We both loved travel. We both loved going to different countries, meeting different people, cultures, languages, food, drink, all that good kind of stuff in life. And we thought, let's do something online so that we don't have to be in one place. We can run our business from anywhere. So we started with what became today consultingsuccess.com, but it started really with the idea of let's begin by sharing information online about our experiences running consulting businesses and becoming consultants. The good, the bad, and the ugly, what was really working, what wasn't working, in the hopes of helping others. We didn't have a clear monetization plan. We just kind of thought, let's figure it out as we moved along. We started as a side business. We both had other kind of businesses or jobs that we were involved in at that time. And after a while, what we saw is people said, hey, like this content is really great. We were building a community around it. People really enjoyed it. They said, do you have a course that I can learn to go through to become a successful consultant? And we said, no, we don't, but we'll create one, and hopefully you'll find that to be helpful. They did. And they said, this is a really great course. It's helped me to become a consultant, so on and so forth. Do you do some coaching? Like, is there someone I can work more closely with you guys to help me and develop a customized plan around what I'm doing as a consultant? We said no, but we'll create one. So we created a program, a coaching program for consultants. Fast forward to today, it's been about 11 years since we launched Consulting Success. We've had thousands of consultants go through our programs. We've worked with almost 500 consultants in our Clarity coaching program. And everything that we do is focused around helping consultants to either make the transition from the corporate world into starting their own successful consulting business, or working with consultants who have already been in that world for many years, but they want to take their business to the next level, either in terms of revenue, scale up to make it more valuable for a potential exit, or just create more leverage in their business so they can spend more time with their loved ones and enjoying life.
Got it. Well, that's a tremendous journey. And along the way, have done a lot of consulting yourself with privately held and even publicly traded companies.
That's right.
Which is where I'd like to, take the conversation today, because our audience is largely made up of, owners of privately held companies or people who are looking to either acquire a business for the first time or acquire and grow their existing business. So I'm really interested to tap into some of your experiences around, what do you see as the common pitfalls or places where owners get stuck in their businesses. I read a statistic not too long ago, like 95% of businesses never get past $1 million in revenue. It's right. Some enormous number that, never really get past this barrier. So where do owners get stuck and how can they get unstuck?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many areas that could prove to be a sticking point for people or hold them back from reaching that $1 million mark. Or in our world, what we care a lot more about than just revenue is actually profit. Mm-hmm. And so we could talk about waste and opportunities to reduce waste and to increase profits. But I think a big thing that I see is a lack of focus. People often believe that the way to grow a business is through addition, through adding more products, more services. But in fact, it's most often through subtraction, right? It's through reducing things that don't need to be there. And when you have clear focus, when you're not trying to offer 10 different things or 10 different products or many different services or whatever it might be, and you can get very focused, it allows you then to really start to create your marketing, your messaging in a way that will resonate with your ideal client or customer more. And so I think that is probably one of the biggest areas that I see is that people go too broad. They try and service, too large a group of customers or clients. And so by doing that, essentially you're trying to communicate to a group of many different people, but your message is watered down because it's not speaking to any one person directly. And so the first thing that we always like to do is to really help people to get clear on who is your ideal client. Like, who do you really want to attract more of? Who's the most profitable? Who's the one that you enjoy working with? Who's the one that you've been able to achieve the greatest level of results with? And start by focusing around that ideal client, developing a message that will resonate with that ideal client. And then you can start layering on marketing that will really accelerate. But the big problem that I see is that people they'll often think about or work on marketing, but they haven't actually dialed in who their ideal client is or customer is, and what is the right message to get that person's attention and interest. And so you want to do those two things first before you just focus on marketing.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Some people call it your avatar, whatever, your ideal client. How often do you find that when you go in and talk to owners that they really don't have any idea who their ideal client is? You have to actually help them go figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's very common. I mean, I just spoke to a client this morning who has an amazing career, recently got into the business, and just said what a lot of people said or say, which is, I have a lot of experiences. Like, I could help a lot of different people. I have no idea where to start. Like, can I just go after all of them? And the reality is, no, sure you can, but you're not going to be typically successful in doing that because you're not a multi-billion-dollar organization. You don't have that many resources to just throw and try stuff out in multiple different directions all at once. Because, let's say you choose 5 different areas to target, you're only going to see a 20% level of progress in any given one. Whereas if you go all in on one or maybe 2 to try out and focus on, now you're going to have 100% or 50% progress. So back to your question, Domenic, a lot of people have or don't have clarity around who their ideal client is, and we have to work through that process. Other times people will have actually a pretty good sense of who their ideal client is, but what's missing is that their messaging doesn't actually speak to that ideal client. So they might say something like, I provide management consulting to small businesses. Well, like, wow, like, what does that mean? How do you define a small business? Who actually is that? And how can that help you to connect with that ideal client or to find them? It's not going to, right? So what you then want to do is ask yourself, how do you get more granular, more specific, more detailed, so that you can really speak to your ideal client, right? The reason that you can get a buyer's attention is by speaking to what is going on, in their mind, the conversation that's already happening. And so one group is they don't have clarity, they have too many different possibilities or options in terms of who they can target. The other group is, they might already be speaking to who their ideal client is, but their messaging is what lacks. There's a disconnect between who their actual ideal client is and their messaging that doesn't actually fully incorporate or communicate in a specific and detailed way who that ideal client is, and doesn't use language that speaks to the problems and challenges and what's top of mind for that ideal client.
And so in that regard, is there a format that you recommend that people follow when it comes to messaging? Like, identify the problem, the solution, the benefits. Like, what is your messaging tree and advice for people?
Yeah, so I'll go through 2 parts here for you. So the first is around the ideal client clarity. We have what we call the niche scoring method, and that is to help people to arrive and to identify which area they should focus and kind of specialize in. And that there's different criteria, but just a few of them, for example, might be, where do you have the most experience, where you have the most kind of passion, where have you created the greatest level of results, so on and so forth. Once you've gone through that and you've identified, okay, here's where I have the highest score, here's where I feel best about, you can now move to the messaging side. And the messaging side, the kind of the classic criteria, is a 3-part formula. It's the 3 W's. So the first is, who is your ideal client? The second part actually has 2 W's, which is what is the problem that they have, and what is the result that they will see or experience from solving that problem. And then the third big Y is, third big W is why, which is, stands for why you. They have a lot of options out in that marketplace. Why should they choose to work with you? And that third one is most commonly left out, right? People will often say like what they do or who they work with, in many cases not as focused and specific as they should be. But that third part, the why you, is incredibly important, right? Because when we're in this day and age where there's more options for people, there's more noise in the marketplace, there's a lot of people that provide the same services that you do, right? There's a lot of business brokers or people that help with mergers, or there's lots of different consultants in all different, industries and aspects of business and life. So why you? And this is really important for you to be thoughtful around, to get clear, like, well, what really does differentiate me from what others, what others are in the marketplace? And that might be the number of years of experience you have, although typically it's not. It might be focusing on the results that you've achieved for other clients where your competitors don't focus on those results. It might be that you have a unique process or methodology or system, again, that creates a certain level of results. But you want to, it might be something that others don't have, or it might be something that others may have but don't talk about, right? There's that classic example from the direct kind of marketing days many years ago of Schlitz beer that was like, you know, the lowest level of sales and market share. And I believe it was John Caples, if I'm not mistaken, that went in. It was a famous direct kind of response copywriter that went in and looked at their process and found that there's all these different things they're doing in terms of steaming like their bottles and purifying water, and they get it from this location. And the Schlitz beer executive said, no, everyone does this. We're not doing anything different than anyone else. But what the copywriter and kind of marketing genius identified is that, yes, sure, others are also doing this, but nobody else is talking about it. And so that became their advantage, and that became what all these ads were about. And their market share went from, I think, the bottom to the top over a period of years, because they brought to the front what the consumer actually found to be very intriguing and valuable, but nobody was talking about. So the why can be something that actually exists in terms of a true differentiation or advantage that you have, or it could be something that just others aren't focusing on, but by you focusing on it and bringing it to the forefront, now all of a sudden you get people to be kind of compelled and intrigued, and there's interest and attention, and therefore you can create a conversation.
Yeah. You know, as a business owner myself, the messaging is something we struggle with all the time. And one of the things that I've noticed is copywriters are popping up everywhere, and you're seeing really unique sort of messaging out there. And there's so much coming at you from so many different angles. It's hard to really differentiate, especially with all these copywriters that have, you know, sort of tapped into the hearts and minds of, you know, business owners, and more are turning over to professional writers. And you're seeing incredible copy out there. It's one of those things you have to be careful. You know, you try to go it alone with your own internal staff, unless they're really skilled at this. You really need to maybe look at bringing in some experts.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, the messaging is one very important part, but the other thing that's really critical to consider is that the most effective marketing is not it's not a one time at the plate, you know, hit it out of the park and you're done. The vast majority of your sales or of your opportunities aren't going to come from that first interaction with the customer or client. It's going to come from the ongoing follow-up. And so therefore, yes, the messaging needs to be on point, but you also really want to be focused and ensure that you have a good system in place that gets you in front of your ideal clients and customers. And I say ideal clients and customers because I know a lot of people might be offering a product and they're thinking about, you know, their market more as customers. Whereas if you're in professional services, you're really thinking about kind of like your responsibility to the client, and you're advising them and working more clearly and more directly with them. But regardless of how you kind of, you know, what your business is, you want to ensure that you're not just giving up. You know, you're not just trying to have one great message or a few kind of attempts, and that if you don't get the client, that therefore, you know, you're not going to. This is really where having a marketing system in your business is really critical, that allows you to get in front of that ideal client consistently over time, for as long as it takes for them to actually become a paying client.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. So let me switch gears here a little bit. And I know this is a topic that you talk about. It's something that you've mentioned, I've seen in some of your podcasts, the importance of having a self-managing company. And by the way, I mean, we've talked about this on our podcast and to our clients on a number of different episodes. But I'd love to hear from you about your experience with helping clients, you know, with self-managing businesses, why it's so critical, and what are some of the biggest stumbling blocks in people, you know, not actually achieving that really important goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, even if we don't necessarily always use the term of self-managing, it's really about creating a business that can operate or run without your direct involvement. And that may not be true 100% of the time, especially for many consultants that we work with. I mean, they want to be involved in their business. It's the reason why they left the corporate world, because they want to make a great impact. They want to do great work, and they enjoy what they do. But I think that the big challenge for a lot of people is that they they think that they need to do it all, or they believe that they can get something done better or faster themselves. Therefore, there's no need to hire other people. And I'm by no means kind of suggesting that people have to go out and hire a whole bunch of full-time employees. I think the big opportunity for everyone, regardless of whether your company is small or large, or anywhere in between, is to really look at how can you leverage systems and how can you leverage other people, whether they be freelancers, contractors, or full-time or consultants, to essentially help you to accomplish more of your mission and more of your vision and more of what's important to you. And I think the big thing, Domenic, that holds a lot of people back is they look at bringing in an external resource as an expense. They think to themselves, like, I don't want to pay somebody $50 an hour to do this work because that's money out of my pocket. And what they're missing is that, let's just say that as a consultant, your hourly fee, even though I'm not a big proponent, or I'm not a fan of using hourly fees at all, but let's just say that your average hourly value was $250 an hour, to make it simple. Well, if you could pay someone $50 an hour to do that same work that you're currently doing, you're actually losing $200 every single hour that you are doing that work. And so the big mindset shift is for people to see that investing in external resources is not an expense, it's an investment. And so when that becomes clear, then it becomes exciting, it becomes liberating, because now you can start to see that you can spend a lot more time doing the things that you actually enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Spending your time on creating greater value for the company. And you realize that, if my average kind of value, if what I can create is $200, $250, or $500 an hour equivalent, well, now by unlocking myself from all that $50 an hour work or $10 an hour work or whatever it might be, I'm actually going to not only not lose that $50 an hour anymore, I'm going to actually now be able to increase the value of my company. And so this is where having better systems and better processes and not having all of the business rely on you becomes not only freeing for you, because essentially you're buying back your own time. Even if you never sell your business or don't have the intention to ever do that, your company becomes more valuable because, one, you're now having a lot more time to either create more revenue, more profit for the business, or to enjoy life while the business is running, and spend time on doing things that you want and enjoy doing. However, if you do ever plan to sell your business, you've now increased the value of that company considerably, because when somebody comes and it looks to acquire, they go, well, can this business run without you? And if the answer is no, then that business is worth significantly less than if you have good systems, good team, and so forth in place, because now they know that there's a lot less risk to them in that business, right? When they purchase it and acquire it from you.
Yeah, that's a great point. We talk about that all the time, that when we look at valuing businesses, that's one of the first things we're asking is, how much involvement do you have in the business? You're required to be there for any piece of the process in the business. And if so, it can really, bring down the value of that enterprise. Let me ask you, do you have a simple formula? And I know that, painting a broad brush it can be dangerous, but do you have a simple formula that people can use on putting a value on their time? Because I don't really know a lot of owners that have ever done that, where they actually put a value on their time.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to approach this. I mean, the first, if you go to consultingsuccess.com, we have a consulting fees calculator that you can enter in a bunch of different information, and it'll spit out what your fee or hourly fee is. Again, even though we don't suggest to use hourly fees, just to arrive at a baseline. Mm-hmm. But I think pricing and so forth is part art and part science, right? So you can identify, well, what do you want to be making annually, and then work backwards from that to figure out how many hours you're working, mm-hmm. what are your expenses, so on and so on. And that can kind of give you that baseline. But then the big opportunity for consultants or those working kind of in this area is not to get stuck at that level. That's just the baseline. That's just where you want to be. Then you want to start looking at, well, what is the value that you're actually creating? What is the return on investment that you're providing to your clients? And that now becomes the premium. So you might go and say to yourself, well, on average, for this kind of project, for it to be profitable for me and based on what I'm creating, it's going to need to be at least $15,000. But then you look at, well, what is the actual impact that I'm having, both tangible value and intangible value that I'm creating for that client or that customer? And you can see, well, actually, it's very significant. So my fee here is the base of $15,000 plus the premium, which is another $15,000. So maybe now it's $30,000 for that project. And as long as the value is there for the client, right? You can't just charge whatever you want to charge if it doesn't make sense to the client, because at the end of the day, they need to see that the risk reward ratio, right, is intact. They feel very confident that if they invest 30,000 or $500,000 or whatever the number might be, that they're going to have a greater return back on top of that. So to answer your question, there's no simple formula. I mean, you can figure out what the market currently, the market standard is, plus what you want to be making, plus how long something takes you, and have that as your baseline. But the big opportunity, I think, for most people, and we see this with a lot of the clients that we work with, Domenic, where they might be coming in from an hourly or kind of daily rate or project perspective, is that they're not fully understanding the value, that they are creating. And when they truly start to understand that and see how value really works and see how to position that value in a way that their ideal client not only gets it, but then becomes excited to make that investment, because they're focusing now a lot more not on just what you are going to do in that project, but what is the outcome and the result for them. That now the perception of value for the client increases significantly. Therefore, they're now willing to invest at a much higher level. That's where you can go from. And we've had clients who have used, I remember one specific client, she was going back to for a renewal with an existing client on a second project. And she was thinking like $65,000 for the project, and based on hourly fees. And we went through, we talked, kind of broke it all down together, looked at what she was really doing, what the outcome would be for her client. And she ended up winning that business after she went back at $240,000. She didn't have to spend any more time. There was no, additional requirement on her side. It's just the way that she repositioned that to her client. And it was still a great value for her client, because what they were going to get was considerable in terms of value and return on investment. But she was potentially leaving, 6 figures on the table. So I think that's the real opportunity for most people, is to have that baseline, to know what is a line in the sand that you need to be at in order for things to be profitable for you and for it to make sense for you to engage in that project. But then to get really clear, what is the value that you're truly providing? What is that return on investment for the client? What happens if they don't move forward? There's a whole bunch of criteria and questions that people need to look at that will help them to frame up and get clear on what that value kind of premium component is. But you want to put those two things together. That's where much greater results starts to happen.
Yeah, and I can see how in the consulting world that makes perfect sense. But if I'm a owner of a manufacturing business or an IT business, I love the concept of what's your annual number? What do you think you're worth? And now apply that down to an hourly basis so you can decide whether or not you should be doing those tasks that you're doing. Should you really be involved in, handling, inbound client phone calls? Unless it's, the executive situation, you could figure that out, right? And I love putting an annual number, breaking it down so you know what your time is worth. Put a worth on yourself, and then figure out how to get everything else done that's below that. So
correct. And you can also reverse engineer that a little bit, right? You can get clear and say, okay, here's where that number is. Does that make sense? In order for me to achieve that number, what do I need to do, right? How many clients or customers do I need to have? What kind of products or services do I need to sell? What kind of marketing do I need to support that? And then based on that, you might increase your projection, or you might say, okay, I want to make 250,000 this year, or whatever the number is. Okay, what do I need to do to make that happen? Well, what would it look like if I want to make 750,000 this year? And then again, adjust the model based on that, figure out what are the components that are necessary to create that level of result, and then go and start working towards that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that way of thinking and that model. I think that's a good frame of reference for folks. All right, let me shift gears here on you. So we've been talking mostly about people who own a business and how they can move the needle. Let's go to the other side of the ledger. People who are looking to buy a business. And whether it's their first acquisition or they own a company and they're looking to merge something into their existing operation, from a consultant's perspective, what advice would you offer to people who are looking to buy a business in regards to their integration into that business? What should their 90, 120-day plan look like when they first take over a business? I think a lot of people, when they acquire a business, they're really trying to dig in deep and understand everything. They may make some decisions too quickly. Maybe you can give folks a good, frame of reference on first 120 days in a new business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to really depend, Domenic, on what was the purpose of that acquisition, right? If you're acquiring a company for its innovation, then cultural fit is going to be incredibly important. If you're acquiring a company just for some technology that it has or for its customer base that you can just take over, then you might be focused on something different. So I think it's important just to look at it from what is the actual purpose. But a few things that I think are very important. Number one is that cultural fit. In many cases, I think that's going to be incredibly important to look at. The other is just to actually have a very clear plan. Right? I think a lot of people dive into things and they don't actually have a clear plan. Also, people often come in with very kind of rosy expectations. They just look at, here's what we're going to like. They can envision. I think this is an entrepreneurial mindset to a degree, where entrepreneurs will tend to just look at what they can envision happening. And they get very excited about the potential, like, oh yeah, we're going to partner with this big company, or we're going to buy this. And when we do that, all of a sudden, so they're always looking like the best case scenario. I find quite often entrepreneurs don't necessarily look at, well, what is the worst case scenario? Or what if this doesn't work? Or, what are the actual steps that we need to work through in order to create that level of result? And when you go through it thinking at not just the best case, but also the worst case and everything in between, it helps you to ensure that when you do encounter a bit of resistance or a challenge, and when you're going to be merging or acquiring or taking over, it's likely not going to be a very smooth ride, all the time. You're gonna face some bumps and hiccups. So preparing for that mentally, but also having a plan so you're very clear on what needs to happen and how to work through things, I think is very important. The other, I would say, is, if possible, don't try and do it all yourself. Like, one of the greatest ways to accelerate your success, and we've certainly seen this in our business, is to find mentors, coaches, essentially people that have done it before, so that you don't have to try and figure everything out yourself and reinvent the wheel. Yep. So, I would really recommend that people identify, a mentor, a coach, an advisor, somebody who can help them to see, and to, even before they purchase a business, to look at, get a different perspective, to formulate better questions that you can then go and ask that company, or get that information through a broker before you actually make that decision, because you really want to have a much better understanding of that business, or as best as possible. You can't have all the answers necessarily, but you want to have as many answers as you possibly can to your thoughtful questions before you go in and acquire business. Now, I can't speak from the position of purchasing a business. I've sold a couple of businesses. I've never purchased a business myself, so I don't have that firsthand kind of direct knowledge. So I'm speaking from what I've seen in terms of working with clients, what I would personally think about if I was to go and acquire a company. There's a lot of, obviously, understanding the financials is really important. Understanding the marketing plan, I think, is very important. Like, really getting clear, like, how is this company acquiring their clients? And what is the value of each of those clients? And personally, for me as a marketing person, what I always like to look at is, like, where's their leverage? Where's their low-hanging fruit? Right? What can I do to go into this business and to make a few tweaks that they're currently not using right now, or not benefiting from right now, but by making a few adjustments, we're going to see a much better result. So I'm always looking for, like, what is that low-hanging fruit? Is it that they have an email list and they're not sending many emails to that list? Is it they're sending emails, but those emails don't have a good call to action? Like, what is it that they have in terms of their assets that are not being fully utilized right now, that we can just turn a little dial, pull a lever, and get a higher yield or a better result from?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I was consulting with a buyer the other day. They were looking at acquiring a staffing agency, and there was some low-hanging fruit in that agency that, with just a little bit of effort, could have a meaningful impact on that acquisition, and almost overnight. And so we got into talking about that, and they're now building a plan for how they'll go execute against that. And if they can pull that off pretty quickly, they might pay for the entire acquisition pretty quickly, which is a tremendous result. The other thing that I would add is when we talk to people about integrating into a new business, somebody has to be in charge of the integration. You can't disperse it. Somebody has to own that process, and the buck has to stop somewhere, so that there is an owner to make sure that all the pieces fit together that you talked about: culture, marketing, client acquisition, all of that sort of stuff. Michael, this has been great advice, great information. As we wrap up here, what thoughts would you have for business owners or potential business buyers during this COVID environment? What are you telling folks to be aware of and prepare for? And it looks like we've got a vaccine that obviously is going to be hitting, but I think we're going to live with this for a while. And so, any advice that you're offering the folks?
Yeah, I mean, so back in April of 2020, I wrote a new book called Act Now: How Successful Consultants Thrive During Chaos and Uncertainty. And I wrote that book really to help the consulting community. I interviewed 6 friends and kind of experts in the space to see if their thoughts aligned or maybe were different from what I was having. But it was very interesting to see that almost every single person that I interviewed said the exact same thing, when it comes to what you should be doing right now. And this to me is when you look at successful people, they don't put their head in the sand when times are tough. What they do is they take more action. That's why I call it Act Now. And if you don't mind, anyone that wants a copy of that book, we're offering for a free copy at consultingsuccess.com/Act Now, just as a way to help people. You can also buy it if you want, but there's a free digital version there. I think the main thing that came from that, Domenic, is we broke the book down into three areas, and I think these are important and beneficial regardless of whether it is COVID or some economic collapse or just any turbulence or chaos in the marketplace. The first is you want to extend your runway. You want to look for ways to be lean, to be profitable, to remove waste. So that's one big theme. The second theme is relationships, right? When times get tough, this is the true opportunity to, if you've invested in relationships, you're typically going to be a lot better off than those that haven't. If you've had a very transactional mindset, you don't have a strong customer or client base, they're going to jump ship as quickly as they possibly can, and they're not going to even think about you, in terms of like that relationship, because they never really had one with you. But if you invested in your relationships with your clients, your customers, you'll be in a much better position. So the first thing that that we did when COVID started, I was walking up and down my neighborhood blocks, like just calling clients on Saturdays, just checking in, how are you doing, how are things going. The more contact that you have with those that you serve or those in your ecosystem, the better. The third thing then is really about planting seeds now that will create the result that you want down the road. And so most of the actions that you take now in the consulting, the marketing world, right, you're going to see the benefit of those actions 30, 60, 90, 120 days from now, not tomorrow. So even though right now you might be in a challenging situation, this is the time to act. Don't wait for things to get better. Start doing things now. And one of the best things that you can do is to be visible, right? The true test of leadership. And every single person can be a leader. It doesn't matter if you are cleaning, somebody's house, or you are leading the company as a CEO, or you're a junior person in an organization. You still can be a leader. And the true test of leadership is not what you do when times are good, because it's very easy to be a leader, in good times. But when times are tough, when there's chaos, that's really the time where you want to step up, where you want to lead by demonstration and show people. And I think one of the greatest ways to do that is through action. It's through, creating content and thought leadership materials and intellectual property. And so one of the things that we have done a lot of for many years, but especially during the COVID time, is we had lots of webinars and like LinkedIn and YouTube lives and different content. Even the Act Now book, the reason that I wrote that was not to make money. The reason I wrote that was to help people, right? And so that's why we made it freely available for people, is just to help. Well, we're not expecting that someone reads that book and goes, oh, like, yeah, I'm going to sign up. But we know that we're planting seeds, we're adding value. That's the way that things work, right? So you add more value now, you plant seeds. And when you do that, good things will come. But the big, recommendation that I have for people is don't look for excuses. Yes, COVID is a challenging time. Many people have lost loved ones. I personally know people who have lost loved ones. It's a very hard time. But life is filled with tough times, and it's very easy if you have the mindset of what's always wrong. Like if you look for the negative glasses, or kind of like you put on the negative lenses, you'll always find something that could be better, or something that isn't, a reason for something not to happen. But instead, if you put on the positive lenses and you just always look at, well, what's good about the situation? What can I do? Then you're going to take more action, and action is what creates results, right? Thinking and planning is not what creates results. Action does. And so my encouragement to people is to embrace action, to take more of it, to think about how you can get closer to your ideal clients, how you can, again, create more value, even if it doesn't lead to revenue growth or profit growth for you right away. Planting those seeds now is what ultimately will create a lot more value, both for the clients and customers that you want to serve, but also for you and your business.
Totally agree. I think this is a period of tremendous opportunity. I think there's the opportunities that are going to pop up everywhere if you're looking for them. But if you're worried about, controlling things, your mind is going to be closed, your eyes are going to be shut. I think there's tremendous opportunities if you're open-minded and, like you said, you're acting. So great advice. Michael, really appreciate you being here today. If folks wanted to get in touch with you, how could they reach you?
Yeah. So consultingsuccess.com is home to kind of, everything, lots of studies that we put out, articles, videos. We have the Consulting Success podcast as well. You can books, you can find on Amazon for the books. Also, you're welcome to reach out on LinkedIn. Just put a little note in the connection request so I know, that you're coming from Dominic's podcast, and just so I know kind of, where you're coming from and so forth. But yeah, I welcome anyone to reach out. And if anyone wants to dive deeper into the world of consulting, we have a 47-page blueprint that, shares some of our most kind of popular articles around how to get into consulting and grow a successful consulting business. And you're welcome to access that at consultingsuccess.com/blueprint.
All right. Michael, thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dominic. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.